to be invited to speak with you and share my experiences today. And I've been given this wonderful topic, creativity and innovation, translating medicine, science, and research into diagnostics, therapeutics, and clinical practice. So hello from me, and I'm joined on the screen here by my friend and colleague, Dr. Jay Mitra from the University of Essex, who's helping me with this recording. So, the subject of commercialization of research is very challenging, and that's what we're going to talk about today. The processes that lead us from ideation to diagnosis, therapeutics, medical devices, and treatment of the patient. A very interesting topic. I am, however, greeting you first of all from my home in Cambridge. Here we are. We are not on the River Cam today, and we're not at King's College, but I thought I'd show you that nice picture as I welcome you to Cambridge as well as to my talk. And here's another lovely picture of Cambridge, but this time we're going to start talking real business, because the Cambridge phenomenon is something used to describe an entrepreneurial ecosystem for a center of world-class research. And we have in Cambridge Europe's largest cluster of bioscience companies. I do acknowledge, of course, that lots of things have happened elsewhere, so I'm not saying we know everything at all, and I acknowledge the knowledge and wisdom from other parts of the world. My story highlights the people aspects of creativity, innovation, and the meeting of serious challenges. And I'm going to start with two real-life stories of translational medicine that took place in very, very tough circumstances. So come to me way back in 1952 in the Netherlands and Holland and meet Dr. Willem Kolff, physician and engineer. The German army were occupying his country at this time, and he was desperate to save the lives of people with end-stage renal disease, kidney failure. He didn't have any money, he didn't have any staff, but he did have a lot of energy, and he was very creative. And he imagined and he improvised. And I'd like you to remember those two words because they're very important. And he took an old washing machine and some used car parts, and he produced the world's first artificial kidney machine, the Kolff dialyzer, in 1942, and that's a picture of it in use. An example of real-life translational medicine from 1942. Now, Kolff eventually developed an artificial heart and began a new organ replacement industry, went to America, and through his early work, of course, things developed so that today we have dialyzers like this medical disposal here. And from his early work came amazing progress in organ transplantation, kidneys, heart-lung replacements. But I don't want us to overlook the human endeavor and vision, because they were as important as the science. It started with improvisation. Now, to ensure we don't overlook the credit that ladies must take, there have been many, many heroines of positive change in medicine. And this lady was fighting to overcome the scourge of cancer, but she also had to fight resistance from her profession and gender inequality. And you probably know this is Marie Curie, who discovered and adapted for medical use radium and polonium and received 2 Nobel Prizes and was the first woman professor at the University of Paris. So, the world of bioscience and medicine have moved on from the times of those examples of turning science into something special. Let's consider the richness of available knowledge, but let's not forget the importance of human inspiration. Today we have accumulated knowledge, we have an educated world, we have digital technology and the World Wide Web, genomics, genetics. We are very, very strong now in artificial intelligence, robotics, massive developments in medical equipment capability, and world-changing developments in therapeutics, including antibody technology. Let's look in a little bit more detail then at how things have to be done today in order to translate science into practical medical things. This is a simple schematic of the very complicated processes that have to be undertaken if we're going to move from an idea through a concept to real planning and design development, and a model, which may be a process, it may be a product, but we have to test it, we have to verify it, we have to validate it, and along that whole pathway, different skills and different kinds of people, different kinds of money will be needed. And when we think of medicine and patient care, here are some of the very important areas we have to deal with. Efficacy, will it work? Safety and risk, regulatory issues, intellectual property, protection of our invention, competition, cost of delivery, ongoing improvements, and financing of what we're doing at every stage. And for drug discovery, and these figures here are probably understated, it can mean 10 years of development, and it can cost $25 million or more. So let's get to some specifics, and let's think about Cambridge and other centers like it. This is a very important model for us to look at in terms of different technologies working together to enable translational medicine to really do a great job. Because in a place like Cambridge, we have technology platforms that are not only pervasive, but they are converging. So biotech, infotech, nanotechnology. And we're going to talk a little bit about open innovation. Because where people work together with different knowledge bases and are close to each other, then tacit knowledge can be transferred between them. And where that happens, particularly in life sciences, which has to cross technology boundaries, because you can't do genetics without sentient computing, then a lot of innovation can take place through connectedness. And in those areas in the world where we find clusters of creativity, where we find clusters of bioscience and other kinds of technology-based companies, these are the characteristics that we find. And this is not my work. Gibbons from Stanford and others have put together a lot of work to show us how and why technology clusters develop. I'm adding to the things that they have told us a very important couple of points here: global thinking, minds without borders, and in my experience, where there is a relatively limited size of population and people can communicate very well together, it makes a big difference. So let's think about the innovation campus, a place where R&D and education and companies are working together, where open innovation, where synergy, symbiosis, knowledge transfer is taking place, and new companies can thrive. And if we can connect our innovation campuses nationally and internationally, we can multiply that capability. And what I've seen happening over the years is new initiatives and culture change leading to a situation where the academic and the clinician and the business person work much more closely together. And the barriers get broken down and joining up occurs, which leads us to be able to do this important task of translating science into something much more. Here's a model of open innovation, just a little bit more information on it. If we imagine a large company doing research and development and eventually bringing products to the market, there's a lot going on in research, a lot of projects, and the funnel narrows as we get closer to the market. Of course, things drop out. Now, the old way of doing this in large companies was to do it all in-house, keep it all in-house. But why not, those of us that believe in open innovation say, not think about bringing ideas and technologies in from the outside, bringing intellectual property in by licensing it in, And maybe we invent something in the processes that are going on here that we don't need. So why not license it out and earn money? Why not also look at products that could be brought into our company portfolio from the outside? And let's say we develop something that looks really promising as a new process. What about a technology spin it out as a new company? So really, when we think about open innovation, we're talking about concepts of partnership, large and small companies sharing in innovation, not just competing. And everywhere I look in the world and see technology leading to clusters of new companies, I see open innovation. This is a little equation of mine. The internet plus innovation plus entrepreneurship equals seismic change and progress. And here's Tim Berners-Lee, who gave us the World Wide Web. And you know, the World Wide Web is so absolutely important when we think about open innovation. We can't do all that connecting. We can't do all those things. Connectedness, connectivity, connectricity, joining up the parts are a very big part of translational medicine and also the building of clusters of creative companies. And I've got a new word for you there, connectricity. Connectivity with energy, not just connected, but actually making things happen. I can absolutely tell you that connectedness has been the beating heart of the Cambridge phenomenon and our success in translational medicine. Now, in my years in Cambridge, I've seen a lot of change, and I have seen open innovation stimulate a different kind of thinking and a new culture, brain circulation, extending the mindset of people, meta-connecting has been a really important factor. Here's some examples. You all know about DNA, one of the great discoveries, the secret of life, the double helix, 1953 in Cambridge. The little guy on the left there is Jim Watson, 25 years old, and Francis Crick. Now think about this, their invention and discovery of DNA, a biological move forward of magnitude, happened in a physics lab. The Cavendish laboratories, which also had these other wonderful people whose names are now on the slide working there, was a physics lab, and DNA, a great biological discovery, happened there. Today, of course, we honor Francis Crick and Jim Watson as well. This is the Crick Institute in London, because from those early beginnings, there's been an enormous amount of translational medicine happening. And around the world now, people are benefiting from those early discoveries of Crick and Watson. Here's another hero of mine. Sir Fred Sanger came from Canada to Cambridge, lived to a ripe old age. The man whose team did the first complete characterization of DNA, the Sanger method of sequencing, giving birth to all manner of things in the field of genetics, a world-class institute, and years of translational medicine. We're not going to look at the detail of this, but I thought I'd show you this picture just to emphasize how important the Human Genome Project has been. And also to note that it did cost a lot of money initially, about $2.7 billion. Today, of course, genome sequencing, not only here, but in your country, where there's been a lot of progress in China too, is done very, very quickly and at a dramatically reduced cost. And of course, the Great Wellcome Genome Center in Cambridge is named also after Fred Sanger. So Henry Wellcome was a fantastic entrepreneur. He was a pharmacist and a great philanthropist. And the Wellcome Trust Fund is now the largest medical research investment fund in the UK. And the legacy of Sanger and Wellcome, and some of it is all listed here, I'm not going to read out all the detail. It is now the home of numbers of companies, numbers of research units, including the European Bioinformatics Institute, the Wellcome Trust Genome Campus. Now let's think about some more big steps in genetic and genomic discovery. And there's a point I'm going to make here that pubs are also important, as well as labs. There's the Department of Chemistry, and down the road from the Department of Chemistry is the Panton Arms. And Shankar Balasubramanian and David Klenneman worked in the Department of Chemistry, and they had some amazing ideas about DNA polymerase and laser spectroscopy. And they formed a little company called Solexa. And they came to investors and they said, we think with money, we could actually accelerate the speed of DNA profiling 1,000 times. We didn't believe them, but we did believe that if they could only accelerate it 100 times, it would change the world. And they got their investment money, and they actually, from Solexa, got about $1 million in cash from a big company in America, Illumina, who make all of the equipment, or most of it around the world, that does all the DNA profiling. And their technology became the beating heart of Illumina. It's a worldwide company, and they employ about 600 people now in Cambridge. So there's another example of translational medicine, a very big discovery starting in the Department of Chemistry in Cambridge. Now, another revolution of which we're very proud in Cambridge is the revolution that translates antibodies into therapeutics that save lives. And there is Professor Sir Gregory Winter, won the Nobel Prize last year, and his partner in crime, Dr. David Chiswell. In 1990, they founded Cambridge Antibody Technology. And in those days, antibodies were little used in a therapeutic manner. In 10 years after their work, the market for antibody-related therapeutics had grown to $600 million, and it's now a multi-billion-dollar sector. That is another amazing story of translational medicine. During this period, when the Cambridge phenomenon was moving fast and these new companies were developing, science parks began to become very important. And in fact, an act of faith in 1970 by Trinity College, Cambridge, who sent their head of finance to America to look at the first science parks there, Professor Sir John Bradfield. He came back and said, yes, science parks are great, we should have one, and Trinity College started the first one in Europe in 1970. And I'm pleased to say that some of the very great science parks you now have in China were modeled on what Sir John and his friends at Trinity started off in 1970. This is one of the newest developments of the Cambridge Science Park, named after Sir John, the Bradfield Centre. It's a state-of-art innovation centre. 600 entrepreneurs are working in there now, developing themselves to the point where they can spin out and grow their companies elsewhere. It's fully occupied, and the science park of which it is part employs about 7,000 people. And as you'll see a bit later, there are a lot of science parks and innovation centres around Cambridge, many of them dealing with bioscience. I've counted about 24. And this is very important because if you think about that chart I showed you earlier of how products are developed and what I said about them needing different people, different premises, different money at different times in their life, then having different kinds and types of innovation center, incubators, accelerators, laboratories is very, very important. And you will find, of course, this is happening around you. It's certainly happening in Beijing, and you have a fantastic science park there that I've been to in Zhongguancun. Now, one of the more recent and exciting things that's happened to us in Cambridge is we have a relatively new investment partner in Tsinghua University, TAS Park. And they invested £200 million in establishing a new bioscience incubator, supporting local science and technology and enabling internationalization. And this is one of the pictures of it. I've got another one here for you. It exists, it's there. I'm working with the people managing it. It's supporting Cambridge Science Park development and growth, and it's connecting the Cambridge cluster with emerging technologies, not only connecting us with China, but around the world, in order that the speed of growth of these companies can be accelerated. South of that particular science park is an even bigger operation in terms of biosciences, the Cambridge Biomedical Campus. It's been developing for 30 years. It's the largest and fastest growing bioscience campus. By next year, it's going to be employing 25,000 people. And this is a picture of the new AstraZeneca, which, as you know, I'm sure is one of the world's leading pharmaceutical companies. This is a picture of their R&D headquarters. They were stimulated by looking at what was going on in Cambridge and the environment there to bring all their R&D here. And this big new building is now ready for use and on the biomedical campus. So just a quick summary here. We won't spend too much time on the detail of it. Here are 15 of the 25 science park and innovation centers around Cambridge. And I've got the ones on this chart who are mostly involved in biomedical work. Some of them have animal facilities. Generally speaking, they all have wet labs. And I'm sure in the future, there will be more. And what this is all doing over the years in Cambridge, of course, it's making the Cambridge cluster a very fertile ground on which to grow companies. There's a list of some here in the startup phase, then small and medium-sized companies scaling up into global players. And they're moving forward all the time. And it's a very exciting situation indeed. And in 2020, there are now more than 500 life science companies in the Cambridge Bioscience cluster. Don't worry too much about the detail on this slide. Look at the beginning, at the middle, for the beginning of my discussion of it. We have talked about conception, formation, growth, and maturity. And then you see on this chart at the top, we find the creativity and innovation doing the conceiving and the grow and the developing. And it's a very, very wonderful virtuous circle or a virtuous square, because technology transfer occurs, commercialization occurs, the cluster is built, knowledge is passed back and forth between the companies. And I've listed on this slide in black all of those elements, including the professional services, the financing and other things that need to be in place so that those companies that are growing in this cluster, translating science into medical treatment, can draw upon all the support that they need. And what we can say is this is a very, very good model of a bioscience ecosystem for cluster formation. One of the very latest successes, Cambridge Medical Robotics, is establishing world leadership and has attracted a very large amount of Chinese investment. It doesn't have products yet in use, but it had them on trial, and it combines artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, virtual and augmented reality. A very exciting company. Now, the university in Cambridge, of course, plays a big part in everything that goes on there. And this is what one of the parts of the university tell us they do. They develop business opportunities. They provide financial support. They actually have a venture capital fund of about 500 million under management. And they're all about the commercialization of research. So this is a strong university presence. It's a not-for-profit company within the university working with business angels, global investors, and enabling companies to spin out and grow as part of the cluster. Big role for the university. Looking at Cambridge as a whole, in summary, what we see, it isn't perfect, by far from perfect, but it is a joined up system now. where all the elements you can see there work together. And you know, clusters of creativity like the one that's formed here can become superclusters. We're working very hard with science parks and clusters in China in order to make those connections. And if you think about convergence in a broader way still, and if you consider the basis of a truly effective joined up entrepreneurial ecosystem in a place like Cambridge or Beijing or anywhere, and if you think of all the sectors that I've listed here, the industry sectors, joined up with the elements of education and research and investment and government, then you certainly can feel that you're moving towards having a truly effective joined up ecosystem. We have a wonderful organization here, the Cambridge Network, that helps us bring all of this stuff together. And I couldn't really overestimate the importance, in my experience, of networking. Any of you that will ever be involved in starting companies or doing research that needs support, networking and being out amongst the people that can help you is so crucial in business life and in medical life too. Now, I want to take a step back, getting towards the end here, because let's just think about the characteristics of the people that will be involved in the kind of innovative activity that we've spoken of. And I'm showing you pictures here of someone you will almost certainly recognize, Albert Einstein, because he said something very important. He reminded us that imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited, imagination encircles the world. And I've spoken quite a bit today about entrepreneurship. And people use this word all the time. In fact, it's very widely used all over China. I know, wherever I go in China, I hear it. People often ask me, well, what is an entrepreneur? What is entrepreneurship? There are business school definitions. I prefer to tell a story about this particular man who was actually a great writer, George Bernard Shaw. And one day he was sitting in his London house with a young man who was asking him interminable questions that were boring, useless questions really. And the great man stood up and he shouted at this young man, "Shut up," he said. "You look at things and ask why, but I dream of things that never were and ask why not." And you know, when I think, and maybe if you think about this in the same way with me, we might come to the conclusion that the great change makers in the world, the people that do make things happen, are people that are not deterred by things going wrong or challenges. They are why not people. If things go wrong, they pick themselves up and say, why not? And off they go again. And that to me is the spirit of entrepreneurship. So just to wind up, looking ahead somewhat, where are the great advances being made in scientific and technical engineering and things like that, where we can expect to see translational medicine active in the future? I've listed a few on this slide, and I'm not going to talk about them in huge detail, but genomics, of course, genetics, virtual and augmented reality, robotics, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology. Those are very important areas. And in some of those areas, I see lots of opportunities for creativity and innovation in translational medicine. And medical devices, for example, if we can make sure that developers and end users work closer together, co-creation and co-development can relate in more effective medical devices and equipment being developed very much more quickly. And there's a good example, the last one there, the market pulling things stimulates people to move quickly with them. And recently here in the UK, the need for ventilators because of COVID-19 created an enormous acceleration in the development of ventilators in the medical products industry. The biomedical industry has got a huge future. There will be more commercialization of research. These are the fields in which it's all going to happen. And that little diagram along the bottom there, I think, is very important, because we see lots of companies now knowing that it isn't any good just to be in therapeutics or diagnosis. There is a need to think about the whole spectrum of wellness and healthcare, all the way from prediction, prevention, diagnosis, treatment, and monitoring. And I think for the future of translational medicine, that's a very interesting series of things to think about. Digital healthcare is one of those things that interests me greatly. This is a great picture. Digital healthcare is doing a lot in terms of enabling us to know what's going on patient by patient. It's also very helpful in education. In this picture, we see essentially anatomy being conducted without a cadaver. Very interesting stuff. One of the other areas where I know there's a great prospect of collaboration between us here in Cambridge and China is regenerative medicine, stem cell therapy, in which you are very strong, certainly in places like Beijing. And I believe this is really a technology still in its relative infancy, and we will see it grow very, very quickly in the long term. And the new era of personalized medicine is emerging, an era where, because of genetics, because of the knowledge we can have about individual patients, because of better knowledge of rare diseases, we will be able to determine individual treatment plans for individual patients. And that, to me, says we're entering the most exciting era in health care and medical development. It will be a fantastic period the next 10 or 20 years. Now, I'm going to end here because I was given a limited time span and I don't want to overrun it. But I do want to share with you a personal passion for international collaboration and understanding. And I'm hoping that some of the things going on in the world today, where people seem to be divided from each other, will not deter us from working together, because better together is a great theme. Working across borders, collaborating, convergence, co-creation, connectedness. So much of the work I've been able to do in the last 25 years working with China has borne fruit, not because of me so much as because of the possibility of working together. And I think that for translational medicine to be super successful, that will be something of great importance. Now I'll end. I hope this slide makes you smile. I tend to end some of my lectures with this picture, telling my students that, of course, it's not my latest class in Cambridge, but I do like to remind them, and I'm reminding you, of something very important. Imagination is more important than knowledge. And imagination is definitely one of the great secrets of the Cambridge phenomenon. And imagination is absolutely essential for making translational medicine a success. So thank you so much for listening to me. It's been my great pleasure and privilege. And let me say to you as I conclude that Cambridge will welcome you whenever you can visit. Bye for now.